Hey, what is up? Welcome to this episode of the Wantrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian Lofermento, and I honestly am so excited about today's episode because today's guest is amazing at what he does, and he has such a unique message, not just in having a great strategy and a great plan when it comes to your marketing, but he places such a strong emphasis on execution, and I think that's so important for all of us as we grow our businesses. So let me tell you about today's guest. His name is Wes Mathews. Wes is a passionate entrepreneur with an impressive track record in growing businesses from concept to success. So yes, for all of you entrepreneurs out there who are tuning in today, this is incredibly important and relevant for you as well. As the original co-founder and CEO of High Level Marketing, he played a pivotal role in transforming the startup into a multi-million-dollar industry powerhouse. Under his leadership, the company expanded to employ over 135 team members nationwide and generated revenues in excess of $20 million. We are all going to learn a lot about marketing and about business growth here in today's episode, so I'm not going to say anything else. Let's dive straight into my interview with Wes Mathews. All right, Wes, I'm so excited that you're here with us today. Welcome to the show.
Brian, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Heck yeah. So I teased listeners a little bit about how awesome you are, but take us beyond the bio. Fill in those gaps. Who the heck is Wes? How did you start doing all these amazing things that you get to do in business?
Yeah, right. So I kind of took the untraditional route, I think, of life. I think a lot of my friends around me, they went to college to get a bachelor degree, to go on to a master degree. I kind of took a different route. Like, school is never my thing. I mean, I was always super attentive and, really nice to teachers. And I had a lot of friends. I was kind of the guy that would set up all the parties. But, as my friends went off to college, I kind of went down this different path and, kind of dabbled in some things and just like a lot of other people, like, wasn't really sure what I wanted to do in life. I ended up getting into became a mortgage broker for a handful of years in my early 20s. That wasn't like my passion. But what happened with me was, in my mid 20s, I was always interested in tech and web and just computers in general. And, being in my mid 20s, I knew that I could get the authority of business owners in the web world. So I moonlit for a company. Somebody from my high school had launched a company that was website design development related. And when I joined that company, I joined as a sales guy. And he's like, hey, you bring a deal to the table, like, we'll fulfill it. Like, you can count on us, blah, blah, blah. Well, the reality was I brought in like 4 to 6 deals, and I think they single-handedly destroyed every relationship I brought through the door. So the reality was, I'm like, this is crazy. Like, there's got to be an easier way to do this. I was watching this company, like, chickens running around with their head cut off. So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to build my own system, my own platform, and I'm going to start my own journey. So that was it. I mean, that was kind of the beginning of kind of what created High Level Marketing. Founded that company in 2009, and the concept was simple. I really wanted to create a transparent digital marketing company, because back then, everybody I talked to, they were just like, we feel we're being lied to. We feel we're spending all this money and not getting the results that, we're being told. So my mission was simple. I just want to create a transparent marketing company. For me, it was really easy to be very straightforward, very direct. And I also had a place for like entrepreneurs. Like, I had this thing about, I worked at this bank. It was federally chartered. It was very corporate. I think at one hand I got fired from that job. Like, I just had this stigma around corporate America, just never was my thing. So entrepreneur has always had a special heart, because I think at the end of the day, I was an entrepreneur. I didn't really realize maybe at the time, but I always just kind of want to go and beat at my own drum, so to speak. So that was the venture. Like, I want to go out and create and start that company.
Yeah, I love that overview, Wes. You're for sure preaching to the choir. I feel the same way as you. I often talk about 9 to 5 as it's the antithesis of everything that I stand for. And it's just a direct pointing to of that corporate life. And I also love in your story, reminds me of that Mark Twain quote, don't let school get in the way of your education. You've just been out there doing it. And I think it shows in not only your path into entrepreneurship, but also in your approach. I think that so much of your messaging, as I looked into your work ahead of today's session, is it really, you said the word direct, and I think that's so powerful, especially in a world. Wes, I'm going to put you on the spot here because I want to hear your perspectives and your messaging surround it. I think there's so much noise about marketing and what is marketing. We hear all these people talking about getting likes on social media and building complex funnels. I remember in my 20s, I had a big whiteboard in my home office and I would draw all these complex marketing funnels. What does marketing mean? If we get it to the basics and cut out the BS around it, what is marketing in your view? Where does it start? Where does it end? What is that purpose that we need to be laser focused on?
Yeah, it's a great question. And funny you asked that. So in full disclosure, right? So I grew high level marketing and I actually sold the majority of that business in 2021. And the reason why I share that now, because I think it plays a lot into the answer I'm about to give you. Oftentimes agencies or web companies, or like if a customer is spending money with an agency, in my experience in 15 plus years of in this space, typically clients don't really know what they're paying for and they don't really know what they're doing. And I had experience around customers spending a few $100s to several hundreds, thousands of dollars, not really knowing what their marketing was going into. So there's got to be a lot of trust with the marketing agency that they're working with. And the reason why I share that is because what I do today through my new company, Stealth Consulting, we really dive deep on the actual, we call it a marketing blueprint, a strategic marketing blueprint, because a lot of businesses don't know the answer to the question that you just asked. And we actually help them uncover what that is. So some low-hanging fruit is just understanding like, what are we offering? So like putting the emphasis on a business, what are you offering? Who is your target market? And what's the buyer persona for that? Because I think oftentimes customers just have services, products. They try to kind of take the spray approach on how they're going to get this product and or service out there. But asking the question of like, who is our target audience? And it sounds kind of like elementary, but the reality is I've have so much experience around customers, businesses that just don't know the answers to those questions. So starting at the very basic level of like, what are we doing? And just even understanding the general numbers around that product and service deliverable. To give an example, like we worked with a business a couple months ago that they had about 6 different service lines that they were executing on daily. And after we went through our process, they realized that where they were spending all their time was the least profitable and the hardest deliverable to execute on. So like after we were done working with them, we kind of flipped everything upside down and they realized that they got to go after a different segment of the market. But what that required was to identify who they're actually going after and being extremely clear about that. So I implemented something in my business in 2014 called EOS. That stands for the Entrepreneurial Operating System. I encourage anybody that's listening, like that completely changed my life. But there's a piece of that framework called the VTO, the Vision Traction Organizer, that can help clients get extremely clear on who are we and what are we doing. So to me, it's that basic.
Yeah, I love that. I really appreciate as well how you started with the people. Who is it that we serve? Because it's probably the lesson that took me the longest to learn as a young entrepreneur. I started my first business when I was 19, is I've heard that quote about what you really need is a starving audience. And when I moved to Los Angeles, I started going to a lot of Clippers games. I love the NBA. And it never got out of my mind. When we all left the Staples Center, we walked outside and who was there? All those hot dog vendors. And they made a killing every single night. Why? Because there was a starving audience leaving a sports game. A lot of people are just sitting there drinking all game long. And the best thing is a hot dog wrapped in bacon. So if we get that wrong, then it sets us up for failure in so many ways. And Wes, hearing you talk about that simplistic example that you gave of a real life client, you're right. So often marketing is simple, but we mess it up. And I think a lot of that comes from kind of the ready, fire, aim approach that most most businesses and entrepreneurs have. Talk to us about you use the word blueprint, which is obviously ready, aim, that part is so important, and then fire. Talk to us about a blueprint. How do we start using that approach of ready, aim, fire, but rather than just throwing stuff at the whiteboard?
Yeah, what's interesting to me, and just one more thought to the last point, not only getting clear from like the entrepreneur side of things, but the VTO, the vision traction organizer, it's really important to get everybody around you on your team rowing in the right direction. So, and what I've noticed is a lot of people avoid the marketing side of things. Like they're working in their business, they're super busy, they don't take time away to work on the business, so to speak. And that's essentially what we do. So, this blueprint day allows us to take all of our experience to then have this session and lead the client through asking them all the challenging questions that they need to have answers. I mean, one of the most basic things I ask people if they're spending money on marketing, I don't care what kind of marketing it is, like, what's your cost per lead? And they'll, like, half of them, more than half of them are like, I have no idea. So for me, that's crazy to have a business. My goal is have a predictable flywheel model so you can make investments and know exactly what your cost per lead is, and then know what the process is from when you get a lead, from prospect, sale to close to fulfillment. And it's shocking to me how many businesses just don't know what their cost per lead is. And then they struggle with, I'm having trouble growing my company, or cash flow, or this or the other. So again, obviously that's a void we're filling in the marketplace. But the reality is like taking time away and just getting really clear. Like I recommend EOS or something for clients to kind of zoom out, spend time as a team together, and just make sure that you're all aligned and having, having the right conversations and asking yourself the right questions. Because another challenge is what worked 2 years ago probably won't work today, right? I mean, text messaging is a pretty powerful tool. As you know, that market just got changed a couple months ago. There's all these different things that you have to stay on top of. So, hire a mentor, hire the right company, talk to other people within your industry to see what's working for them. But again, I think it's just zooming out and taking the time to go through these questions and answer some of these challenges.
Yeah, I love that visual. And listeners, we are going to point you towards Wes's website at the end of today's session. It's at stealthconsulting.com. We'll talk about it again at the end. But Wes actually has, he mentioned the word flywheel. He actually has a visual depiction of what that marketing blueprint and the roadmap and accountability to go along with it. He actually has a map and chart of what that looks like, covering sales, the customer, the journey, the tracking, everything that goes into it. So don't worry, there's going to be a lot of information in today's episode, but there's great resources from Wes and his company that you can turn to from there. But Wes, where I really want to go is, I think it's fascinating that in your line of work, you've obviously been your own CEO of a hugely successful business. You also have worked with clients of all different sizes. I want to ask you, what changes as our businesses mature, as our businesses grow? Are there different considerations? Are there different things that maybe work at the beginning of launching our business versus things we need to shift as we get bigger? What's your perspective on that?
Yeah, I mean, without trying to shove everything in a box, and again, just speaking from my own perspective, I think like 0 to 1 million, like that's just a crazy time, right? You're trying to, like, as an entrepreneur, you're wearing multiple hats. You're trying to gain traction, grab clients. You're doing a lot, and I think the next phase from there, like 1 to 5, is when you start to bring additional resources into the company. So meaning managerial, kind of my experience, what I did is the individuals, I would fish from the pond of my team to promote them and managers. And I think as you mature through clients and brand and just your deliverable, along with size and scale of revenue, you have to start bringing in the right people. And I think for me specifically was, looking in the mirror and realizing, like, you're not great at everything. Like, what are you, and by you, I mean me, what am I best in the world at? Where can I add the most value and what I'm having the most fun at? And hire everything else out. And just really make sure, invest in the best people. My philosophy early on with that business was they didn't have to be the best per se in terms of like schooling or like a ton of experience and exactly what I'm hiring for. I was just trying to not hire assholes and people that had a lot of passion. So I think that at some point the entrepreneur has to look towards, what's my end goal here, right? And this is why I recommend the VTO or looking into EOS, because when you start to put your goals and your vision down on paper, people around you can actually see what you're thinking. Because I think there's a lot of entrepreneurs that are called visionaries. Like, I'm a visionary entrepreneur. I'm a very visual guy. And one of my mistakes early on was assuming that everybody around me knew what I was thinking. And that was a big mistake. And until I found this format that I was able to communicate through my company. So again, I think that 0 to 1 is like, how do we get to 1? And then 1 to then beyond to like 5 is I implemented EOS, which is an amazing framework. Again, I mentioned I didn't go to an Ivy League school. I didn't have any like business training. EOS gave me the right framework that worked for me. It was one of those aha moments as I was like reading a book and I'm like, oh my gosh, like this book was written for me specifically. It's amazing because it just speaks to entrepreneurs. But that framework allowed me to kind of grow to the next level. And I think from there, you kind of hear the adage, like what got you here won't get you there. You have to double down on the right types of people and the right types of management. So at some point I had to look beyond our staff and get very serious around, hey, if I'm trying to get to X revenue or X whatever, finding that right person who's done that before at scale, that's way smarter than me. And I think sometimes entrepreneurs struggle with that. Like they want to be the smartest person in the room and kind of control everything. But I think once I just learned to let go and really rely on people and just be very clear with what we're doing and setting objectives and goals, like that's when the company really just took off.
Yeah, I love hearing how transparently you share all of this stuff with us, Wes, because what I'm hearing is obviously a level of intentionality. You're very intentional in your growth plans. And you talk about being a visionary. You clearly have those big visions and those big dreams. You talk about setting goals and how important that is. I want to ask you about this because here we are at the beginning of 2024 when this episode is airing. And a lot of people are going to want to make this year the best year ever, obviously. However, there's so many things that when we set goals, it's never a linear path there. You talked about in your intro about your own path has not been traditional or linear. I remember in 2020 when the pandemic started, I recorded an episode and I said, this will be the time period where a lot of people build extraordinary businesses. Just like during the Great Depression in the 30s, more millionaires were made then than at any other time in history. There's always opportunity. Talk to us about that because a lot of people, it's something that I hear within the wantrepreneur to entrepreneur community is people wonder, am I late to the game? Are these markets saturated? There's all these shifts with AI and all these other things. How do we cut through all this noise and BS that's out there, regardless of time, regardless of the more macro circumstances?
Yeah, it's a big question, right? And I think that, for me, it's what are you passionate about? Right. So like when I was in my throes of running high level marketing and started that company, like what charged me up was not getting involved with client work and just running the organization. And like that was at a point in my life where that made a lot of sense. I'm 42 today and I'm kind of going backwards in a sense of now I'm getting more intimate with clients because that's where I want to spend my time. But I think over the last 2-3 years, I've really realized the value I can add and what I'm passionate about. I kind of mentioned before, like, what are your 3 uniques? And I think that getting really clear on that and being true to your passion, then things don't feel like work. And if you can understand what those top 3 things are, and you can sort of delegate everything else or just stay within your sweet spot, I think it goes back to like, I have a love-hate relationship with setting goals. But again, I encourage everybody to read something like Rockefeller Habits, Scaling Up, or EOS, because EOS created a framework around setting goals and like setting 90-day rocks that are goals. So I think it's important. But what I've also learned in my experience is like, I don't beat myself up. As long as I'm doing better, as long as I'm improving and doing better, I mean, what my life revolves around now, it's really around personal, family, business. So I've had the fortunate experience to be part of EO Entrepreneur Organization. I've been meeting with 7 other guys for every month for 4 hours. It's almost like our own board of advisors, all different types of entrepreneurs from all different types of life. And, we dive really deep every month in personal, family, business. And how I gauge that now is like I got 5 kids. I have a family, my wife of almost 20 years, reevaluating what's important to me. and then just understanding like how am I prioritizing my life, right? Because there was a point at early on in my company, my goal early on to be an entrepreneur was I wanted to make $1 million. Like that was my goal. Don't ask me why that was the goal, because maybe growing up in the 80s and 90s, if you had $1 million, like you made it. The reality was things completely changed for me when I stopped chasing money. And now it's kind of like the money follows if like as you invest in your passion and you're really able to tune into your 3 uniques and add a ton of value. So I would just tell people like, don't beat yourself up if you're making incremental improvements, doing better than the day before. But again, I think that if you can get clarity on those 3 things, that's one thing I wish I would have done a lot earlier. I think I always knew what they were, but until I could call them out, it just took a lot of time to get there. But I think life, you need to go through that time and you got to go through those experiences. That's what builds you, right? So yeah.
Yeah, listeners, how frequently do we say on this show that success leaves clues? Wes is giving you insights, not only with his strategic hat on, but he's giving us glimpses into the way he operates on a personal level as an executive of his business, but also as an executive of his life. These are the things that make a difference from a very successful entrepreneur. So these are things that we need to recreate in our own lives and model after and find those answers for your unique circumstance, your unique desires, and the life that you want to live. So Wes, I love how openly you share these. I also want to call on one thing that I think we need to celebrate more in the world of entrepreneurship is longevity. So I started my first business when I was 19. It was a soccer blog, and we grew to 3.5 million readers a month with a staff of 20 writers. Wes, SEO was the name of the game back then, and gosh, has that changed. It was very easy back in 2008. From your perspective, how has marketing changed with all your experiences? Obviously, in your past business, with you looking forward, I'm sure there are certain things that used to really work with SEO is just white text on a white background. You could crush it. Yeah. But what are those things you've seen change?
Yeah, you're looking at I was the original one that I kind of fell into SEO by accident, to be honest with you. So when I first launched my company, it was sort of like I'll cut it really short, but it was like a directory for businesses that they could piggyback on. And I kind of found out that I got one ranked on the top page of Google by accident by putting out, really nice title tags and meta tags. And I'm talking like 2006. So totally by accident. But to answer your question, thinking about, I used to tell people like a decade and a half ago, when we talked to them about their website, organic search or paid search, anything like that, I would say, you don't want your sister's, cousin's, brother's, neighbor's friend down the street managing your stuff. And that resonated with people, right? They're like, I get it. We got to hire a professional firm, blah, blah, blah. Well, the reality is, I think that individual today can do a fine job managing marketing for a company, as long as the company has clear direction of where they're going. I think marketing's completely changed in the sense of how people look. I'm 42. Cell phones kind of came out, I think, maybe after high school. How people are searching, and I mean, everybody's glued to a cell phone. I mean, I have 5 kids. My 14-year-old spends the majority of his waking hours on TikTok. I don't even go on TikTok. So, I mean, things have changed. How people buy, how people learn about information, share information. I mean, Snapchat, there's all these things. Now, like I'm on Facebook and all the kids think I'm like a dinosaur, right? But I think that companies have to pay attention to this stuff and realize that a lot of these marketing things and SEO, it's all a commodity. And I mean, the one thing that's happening is prices are coming down. So again, I think to double down on, very specific around the strategy, and then align yourself with the right company that can give the best recommendations on how you can execute, I think is how you stay. Because like AI, I had a conversation the other day, like AI can't replace everything, right? Somebody asked me the other day, like, oh, does your blueprint just spit out AI? I'm like, I wish it were that easy. But the reality is, I mean, AI is a tool, just like any other tool you'll have in your tool. But I have really nice tools in my garage. I don't know how to use half of them. Like what I can do is I can hire somebody, set a clear objective, and agree to a price, and kind of maybe coach them or project manage. And I think that's the same in a business too, right? Marketing is just a big toolbox. What tools do you need to whip out, and who's going to run and manage that for you? Because there's so many things out there. You just need the right people on the team or the right advisors to steer you in the right direction. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's funny hearing, obviously your 14-year-old son loves TikTok. And I feel like it's a really appropriate place for us to go in this conversation because I feel like most marketing conversations within the world of entrepreneurship, they get obsessed with tactics. They get obsessed with these platforms, which you and I have personally seen change so much over the years.
Yeah,
it's funny. You talking about those directory websites, those were huge players back in '06 when you started, back in '08 when I started. And obviously those channels have changed over the years. But I think what's more important than tactics is that strategy. So Wes, I'd love for you to speak because for a lot of listeners, it'll be the first time that they consider that difference between what is marketing strategy versus what are marketing tactics and how do all of these play together. I love your toolbox analogy into a marketing plan. Wes, how much of an effective plan is strategy versus tactics and how do they fit?
Yeah, I mean, I think they have to like interweave at almost like perfection, right? I mean, I think that depending on the individuals you have or the vendors you hire. But I think number one, the entrepreneur, like somebody's got to be able to listen to the entrepreneur to see the vision, to help that entrepreneur like architect and engineer what that strategy is going to be. And I think that's the one thing with entrepreneurs, like a lot of entrepreneurs want to do it themselves, but like if marketing isn't your forte, hire somebody to do that for you. Doesn't mean you're not going to be in the room to give guidance, but I think somebody that can extract that out of your brain, put that into a strategy, again, aligning with the goals and objectives of the company and what are we trying to accomplish. And then working with, I mean, this is why I really created Stealth, because this is a big gap in the marketplace. Where we come in is then we help align the tactics on, okay, now we have the strategy. Here now are the tactics. And what we do as an organization is look at, if we were on the advisory board or investors or own this company, here's how we would invest. Because again, I like to be as unpredictable as I am. I like to be predictable with my dollars. So if I'm going to give you $1, I know I can get 10 back. That can be achieved with marketing done properly. And a lot of companies, they can get there. And I think if you work with the right people, with the strategy aligned with the right tactics, and again, this is where finding the right digital marketing company, finding the right vendors, partners is so imperative, and really understanding what you're trying to do. Because once you understand what your strategy is, then you just measure against that strategy, right? Whether it's through a vendor, through a consultant, whomever. But as long as that's clear, you can start to actually track to see if you're making traction. But again, oftentimes I see clients struggle, businesses struggle. They don't know what their customer lead acquisition cost is. They don't know what they're doing. They're spending a ton of money here, over there. Sally handled that, but now Sally's gone. We don't know who's managing this. We need to get sales opportunities. We don't have a process. We don't have a system. It's just pure chaos. So I think it's super important. It's achievable. And again, I think it's just, as an entrepreneur, you have to allocate time to zoom out, to work on the business, and be careful not to just get trapped within the business on day to day, because it's easy to get sucked in. And you mentioned 9 to 5. Sometimes as an entrepreneur, it's, you're 9 to 9 a.m., right? Like you might go 24 hours, but it just depends on how you operate and how fast you want to run.
Yeah, really important advice for all of us. Wes, I cannot let you come on this show and not ask you this next question, because you talk about the importance of us hiring the right people to execute that strategy and execute that plan for us. I think you are incredibly uniquely positioned to answer this next question, which is, what are those things that we should look out for? And in a world where everyone is a TikTok and Instagram guru and everyone's an expert, what are those things that business owners should look out for when they hire agencies to start executing, whether it's on social media or SEO or sales and marketing or copywriting? What are those key things to look out for?
Great question. So number one, Google reviews. I don't care what you're looking for. Research the company you're talking to, interview 3 of them. Look at the Google reviews and talk to some existing clients, preferably ones that they don't send you, and preferably ones that are in your industry, maybe somewhere else, right? So, I'm in Michigan, maybe talk to somebody in Ohio, California, doesn't matter, but not somebody in my backyard, and invest the time. And I think that's one thing that I could probably say, I wish I would have done a better job as an entrepreneur, to say, go slower, do more due diligence. But now I have a rule, like before I hire anybody to do anything, I interview 3 people, because I think as an entrepreneur, like you want something done, you fall in love with that person and or that company, because obviously when you interview anybody, they're coming with their A game. They're going to tell you all the best things, right? So if you can pause, understand what you're trying to do, get 3 different bids, actually talk to people for results, because, just the adage, like, talk is cheap. Talk to specific people that are experiencing what you're looking to do, and that can completely change your life, because I've seen companies get wrapped up in bad companies that are spending tens of thousands of dollars a month that have nothing to show for it. And again, we're talking about something near and dear to my heart, because there's companies that are like, hey, that sounds a lot easier than it can be done. That's where we come in as consultants with clients and really help them through that and take that burden off. So one book I always recommend to any entrepreneur that'll listen, it's called Who Not How by Dan Sullivan. That completely, super tactical book. As an entrepreneur, I think everybody should read that. But to keep it simple, like, we just take on that burden and responsibility for companies so they can be best in the world at, because again, most people's uniques aren't what we're talking about. So that's where we fill the void. But again, in the event you're going to take it on yourself, 3 quotes, 3 different people, get that feedback, take your time.
Yeah, for sure. Good advice. And it's advice that expands our boundaries. You're right. It's so easy to be sold on that first TV that you see at Best Buy. It's big. It has all these features, but there's so much due diligence that goes behind it and all the things behind the scenes. So really good advice there, Wes. I do want to squeeze one more question out of you before we wrap it up, as we are running out of time, but I do want to hear your perspective, because I love that you talked about the toolbox, and AI is a tool. It's not going to magically do things for us, but obviously here in 2024, AI is going to become an even bigger player in the way that we all operate. Where do you see AI in a great manner, and for the not so great manners? I already see it. A lot of people are sounding the same because it's all ChatGPT content that everyone's rolling out, but what do you see the role of AI becoming here in 2024?
Yeah, I don't know if I could speak to 2024, but I think in the next, 1 to 5 years, I think it's going to completely flip things upside down. One, I'll give you a little example. My kids play football for the local town, right? And I'm the announcer for their football games. So one day I had this idea, like, they come out of the gate, they're all pumped up. And I'm like, most of the parents are my age. They all grew up in the 90s. So I'm like, the name of the football team's the Northville Colts. So I had this idea. I went to ChatGPT and I said, I want you to write me a rap song for the Northville Colts. And I added like a couple things that they do, like they're orange, black, and white, and blah, blah, blah. And I said, write it from the voice of Tupac. And then I went to a website called Fiverr.com and I hired a AI digital rapper that had Tupac, whatever he had, and they created this song for me for $40. And it's a rap completely written by ChatGPT in the voice of Tupac. And you could put this thing up for a Grammy. It is an amazing song. So I think, to answer your question, I think that we are in a rare opportunity that, again, this is a tool that's just a shiny tool. You got to understand how to use it, but it's going to completely disrupt a lot of things that we know. And I think it's going to be adopted really, really fast. Some things are super positive, like on the health side, like detection. But I think that, unfortunately, there's going to be a lot of negative to this too. In terms of, voice, people taking voices, my example, like for music, but even for like web, like I see this big shift in like how people traditionally advertised online. And I think it's harder and harder now to realize what's real, what's not real. But, who knows? I don't have a crystal ball, but I think if, you and I kind of mentioned about 2006 in SEO, and here we are, 16, 17 years later, I think we're in the same beginning, except I think what happened between 06 and now for AI is going to be a way shorter window. And I think some of the stuff, we don't even know what the capabilities are, but I'm excited for it. I think people have to have an open mind and just stay a little current on it.
Yeah, I love hearing your perspectives on it. And you're right, in a world of AI, if you can dream it, you can do it. Wes, until you said that you went to Fiverr, I thought you as the announcer were the one who was rapping. I was going to invite you to drop some bars on us right here in real time, but love the fact that you did that. Wes, as is customary at the end of every episode, I love giving my guests the hardest part of the episode, which is with so much knowledge and so many different topics that we really talked about here today. What's the takeaway? What's the one thing for listeners who are sitting here going, gosh, it's the beginning of the year. I don't have a strategy. I don't have a plan. I don't have tactics in place. I've got a lot of questions. Wes is talking about doing a deep dive and a blueprint, all these things. What's the one takeaway? What's an action that you hope every listener takes on board here at the beginning of the year to more effectively and more accelerated grow their business this year?
Yeah, I think for me would be, again, I don't think I read many textbooks through my schooling days, but some books that really made an impact on me from a business perspective. I recommend reading Traction by Gino Wickman. I recommend any book by Dan Sullivan. There's Who Not How, The Gap and the Gain, and 10X is Easier Than 2X. Honestly, those 3 books from Dan Sullivan can completely change perspective. Look, entrepreneurship's a grind. A lot of people, like I spoke to somebody earlier today, and she had produced a movie that I love. It's a documentary, and it's about an hour and 20 minutes, and I watched it. It's just amazing. But it was a 5-year journey for her to produce that film. So I think it's just, stay on the wheel, keep asking questions, follow your passion, and just like seek knowledge, seek a mentor, find a group. EO, Entrepreneur Organizations, changed my life. It's my tribe of people. It's made up of other entrepreneurs that have a select type of criteria. So I think having your tribe of people that you can bounce questions off of, different types of groups for support as you grow and continue your business, I think are super important. But yeah, just keep pushing, keep going.
Yeah, really important advice for all of us, no matter where it is in your journey. This advice is always going to hit, because if you're thinking you get to some magical hump and it gets easier from there, you always need to keep at that grind, as you pointed out, Wes. So I think it's really strong advice for every entrepreneur and wantrepreneur who's anywhere in their journey. And with that said, I've teased your website a little bit and all the awesome resources. You guys also have a free deep dive that you do with people. I think it's absolutely incredible. So drop those links on us for listeners who want to check out your work, Stealth Consulting, all of that. Where should listeners go from here?
Yeah, you can go to stealthconsulting.com. You can also find me on LinkedIn, Wesley Mathews with 1 T. Love entrepreneurs, love answering questions, love giving experience share. But yeah, Stealth Consulting, LinkedIn is probably the easiest way to get a hold of us. And to your point, if you're looking for something, yeah, we do a deep dive. We just give away free information. Typically people come to us and say, hey, this is wrong, that's wrong, we don't know about this. We'll do a quick analysis, add some value, and if it makes sense to work together, great. If not, that's okay too. But yeah, just love helping entrepreneurs, and happy to share any feedback.
Yes, listeners, you all know the drill. We're making it as easy as possible for you to find those links wherever it is that you're tuning into today's episode. Scroll right on down and click through to those links. Stealthconsulting.com is Wes's business's website. There's actually screenshots of what the deep dive analysis looks like, some of the various things that they analyze in that. So definitely check out stealthconsulting.com. We're also linking to Wes's personal LinkedIn down below if you want to connect with him. You've seen how generous he is with his knowledge and resources here today. So on behalf of myself and all the listeners worldwide, Wes, thanks for joining us here today on the Wantrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast.
Thank you, Brian. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Thank you.